started here.
In fact,
Thank you all for coming.
they
This is
care.
the last in our series this year, Backyard Farming. I don't know if you were aware of the full series, but we call it Animals in Your Backyard, Wild and Domestic, including Children. We've covered a good number of these, except for the poultry, which we will be doing tonight. And I think we've had a very informative and, I think, entertaining series of speakers this year. I'm very, very happy with that. And we'll be certainly wanting to get your feedback, particularly on what you might want to have us cover next year. We're planning to do the same format, and so we'll be looking for input on that. Again, as you know, the series is brought to you by the Lee Ag Commission, the Lee Sustainability Committee, and the Lee Library. And Ruth has been also providing not only books, but also refreshments for us. So I think we've all been very thankful for her and enjoyed what she's doing. And she said that the books that she got here were about the only ones left on her shelf from the ag backyard farming bit. So a lot of books are out, which is very good to hear. And so there's quite a good collection. There's a few here that haven't been taken out, and I think said they could take them out from here if they have a card.
If you get all your details and a blood sample,
Okay. Our first speaker will be Tappan, and she will be talking about her experience with ducks and geese, the waterfowl. I guess she can describe her extent and why she did what she did and what she is doing now. And if you want to introduce, I guess you're on the Lee Conservation Commission.
Yes, I've been on the Lee Conservation Commission for quite some time. I currently do not have any domestic animals. Nonetheless, I have a long history of working with both domestic and wild animals as wildlife wild bird rehabilitator. I worked at Audubon Park Zoo in New Orleans for many years, and I've worked for private waterfowl collection and kept a number of domestic animals. So, without further ado, so I've been invited here today to talk to you about ducks and geese as domestic poultry. But first I'm going to start with a bit about wild waterfowl. That is ducks, geese, and swans. There are approximately 147 living species of waterfowl throughout the world. 2 species of ducks have been domesticated. The mallard, which is northern hemisphere, throughout the northern hemisphere, is the progenitor of all domestic ducks, except for the barnyard muscovy, which is derived from the South American wild muscovy. And the domestication of the mallard probably predates the domestication of the jungle fowl, which is the ancestor of the chicken. There are approximately 20 breeds of domestic ducks in North America. Geese were domesticated early also, probably at least 3,000 years ago. 2 species were domesticated of geese also. One, the Asian swan goose, gave rise to the rather elegant Chinese goose and the massive African goose. Those are both the ones that have the knobs at the top of the bill. The European greylag is the ancestor of all other goose breeds. And in North America, there are 9 domestic goose breeds. There are no domesticated swans. Ducks and geese are underappreciated and underutilized. Ducks especially are well suited for the small farm and for backyard poultry keeping. While preparing for this talk, I visited the Livestock Conservancy site for an update. This is an organization that's been around for many decades, and they're concerned with the threat of losing distinctive and productive breeds of livestock, not only poultry, but also all the four-footed domestic breeds. And it just so happens that this is International Heritage Breeds Week. So this is very apropos to be talking about this. I have a handout. It's the Livestock Conservancy's Conservation Priority Poultry Breeds for 2019, and it lists in very small print, unfortunately, but I just printed out the poultry. I did not include the cattle or swine or any of those. So some of the breeds listed here we'll be talking about a little bit later. The ones in bold, the names in bold, are ones that are distinctly North American. And it's a little confusing because one of them is the Australian spotted duck. It is a North American breed. So why ducks, why geese? They're not often considered. The first thing that you need to know is you do not need a pond. And in fact, a pond can be very detrimental. It's very difficult to control predators in and around a pond. If you want your birds to come in at the end of the day, it's very difficult to get them back. They can make a mess of the banks along the edges of the pond. So you definitely do not need or even want to have a pond. I did not have a pond or any waterway. So why raise ducks and geese? And this is not to say that any other type of poultry is not also something worth keeping. This is not a one is better than another. Ducks and geese are easy to raise. They are probably, of the poultry breeds, the most resistant to disease. They're very resistant to cold and wet weather. They have very thick feathers. The waterproofing helps the oiling. It's actually wax that's on the feathers. Helps to keep them comfortable. They also handle hot weather very well as long as they have shade. They are excellent, both ducks and geese are excellent foragers. Ducks especially will forage for insects. I'm going to pass this around. These are khaki Campbell and Welsh Harlequin females on pasture. And geese are top-notch grazers. They can get all, or once they're grown up, they can get all or most of their food from the pasture. And both ducks and geese are efficient producers of eggs and meat. Ducks, especially eggs, but they're also very good producers of meat. Depends on the size of the bird that you're raising. And geese are especially useful for meat production. I'm going to talk about duck eggs. If you want to raise ducks just for the fun of it, and you'll get a few eggs, it really doesn't matter what kind you have. But if you want to raise ducks for top production, you need to make sure that you have the breed and the strain selected for egg production. And these birds will actually lay better than the best egg strains of chickens. A high-producing duck can average 275 to 325 eggs per bird per year. Duck eggs are 20 to 35% larger than chicken eggs, and it's very difficult to contain them in just a regular egg carton from the grocery store. You really need extra large jumbo containers. I'm not going to pass this around. I will leave this here and you can come up and look at it later. These are hard-boiled, so don't worry if anybody drops an egg, no problem. But this shows kind of average size of duck eggs. These are from Welsh Harlequins, which is one of the breeds that I raised. And this is a jumbo egg carton. It fits nicely. If you try putting them in a carton for large eggs, quite often you can't get it closed. You have to use a rubber band. And so the large eggs, a dozen is 30 ounces. If you wanted 30 ounces of large chicken eggs, you need to buy a carton of 18 to get the same equivalent of eggs. The shells are pretty much always white. The hard-boiled eggs, they get a little chalky looking, but they're generally kind of a pearly white color. So this is just cracked duck egg shells. The other thing about duck eggs, people sometimes wonder how they taste. They don't taste any different. They do look different. These are not for consumption. You can probably tell, these are really good eggs, which is the duck, and again, I'll have this up here, which is the duck and which is the chicken, just by size. But the other thing, and the lighting isn't that good in here, but the whites of duck eggs are extremely white. The whites of chicken eggs, in comparison, are kind of yellowish or greenish. So you can come up and look at these later. And goose eggs are even bigger, of course. So it's important to choose the right breed, and also within that, a strain, meaning that the birds are specifically bred for egg production. If you're, so you should avoid showbirds and crosses if top production is what you're looking for. The best breed, typically you hear runner duck is the best, the highest layer, but it is not. The highest layer is the khaki Campbell, and they can lay up to 330 eggs per bird per year. And this is from 340 eggs per year, and that's from a bird that's about 4 pounds. And I've kept khaki Campbells. The next best is Welsh Harlequins, and I do have some pictures I'll pass around. They lay 240 to 330 eggs per year. They're about a pound heavier, and they're both they're excellent at foraging. The runners are also another lightweight bird, and they lay 150 to 300 eggs per year. A medium-sized bird, if you're looking for something that's more of a dual-purpose meat and egg layer, is an ancona, and they're kind of colored like you'd say a pinto pony. They're white with various splotches of black on them, and they can lay 210 to 280 eggs a year, and they're about 6.5 pounds. And these are all on the conservation priority list. When I first started with Welsh Harlequins, they were on the critical category, and now they're down to watch. So that's a very good thing. Why don't we wait till the end for questions? If that's okay? All right, go ahead. Go ahead, quick.
Say, how many eggs per year, how many years eggs do ducks lay eggs, and what do you do when you put them in?
3 to 5 years, and probably put them in the stew pot. Any of these breeds can be used for meat. They're going to make a smallish carcass. And if they're on pasture, they're not particularly fatty. Rearing ducklings. Pass some of these things out here. So this is about the ducks, and what do these birds look like? The Welsh Harlequins look very much like a mallard, kind of have a frosted look to them. And the khaki Campbells, so you can really see the mallard influence. The khaki Campbells have the green head and neck with brown bodies. The female khaki Campbells are all brownish. The Welsh Harlequins are very lovely, kind of an ivory with darker speckles. So for rearing ducklings and goslings, excuse me, the basics are the same for all young poultry. You want to keep them warm, dry, protect them from drafts and predators, and provide proper nutrition. The important word in that sentence is dry. It's important to keep ducks and geese dry. I'm only going to mention a few important points about raising the ducks and geese because there's many resources available for all the details about it. But it's not just like raising a chicken except adding extra water. They need good footing. Do not raise them on newspaper. Something like pine shavings would work well. When they're first learning to eat, it's good to cover those shavings with burlap or a towel so they don't ingest a lot of little stray bits, and then they can specifically see the food. It's often difficult to find food for ducks. There are very few places in the country that sell duck food. It is crucial to use a non-medicated feed because the medication that's used for chickens in medicated feed is deadly for ducks. And quite often, the feed for chickens is excessively high in protein. One of the biggest problems with, one of the biggest difficulties in raising ducks and geese is not disease or things like that. It's excessive protein, which causes the legs to go or the wings to twist. And also, feeding layer pellets to young birds is not good because the calcium phosphorus balance is off. Calcium level is too high. They very much like finely chopped tender greens like grass, dandelions, lettuce, sprinkled in the water. You do need to supply plenty of fresh drinking water for them, but the challenge is to keep the area dry at the same time, and that can either be done by putting your water container on something larger to catch the spills, or to raise them on a wire, at least have the water on a water porch, so the hardware cloth, they can walk on that wire base and the excess water drops through. And they should not get swimming water until they're at least 2 and maybe 4 weeks old. They'll manage to get soaked anyway, but if the ducks get wet and chilled and they can't get out of their water container, they can die from complications. And so these are Ancona ducklings, different colored patterns on them with just a chick waterer, and they're getting started. The food containers not even there, but they have a cloth underneath them, so they can differentiate the bedding from their food. So, sexing waterfowl, sexing ducks. Is it a boy or is it a girl? And all waterfowl can be vent sexed. Males have a penis, and a skilled examination of the cloaca you can determine if it's a male or female. There is a male sex organ. But it's easier and much less intrusive to check external features. For ducks, it's pretty easy. Females quack, males do not. They kind of have a hoarse cough-like. They're not silent, but everybody knows what a quacking duck sounds like. If you hear that, it's a girl.
Donald Duck is a girl.
I didn't make up the creature, so I don't know. Older ducks have been known to change their plumage and their sex from male to female or the other way, so who knows. But anyway, that's one of the easiest ways to tell. They have to be grown a bit before they get the impulse to really do a lot of talking. But males, it just always sounds to me like they have a cold or sore throat. It just doesn't carry very well. Also, by plumage, some duck species, like the Welsh Harlequins and the khaki Campbells, the females and the males are colored differently. It's easy to tell. Some ducks, the plumage is the same, male and female, but males have what's called a sex feather or a sex curl. So when you see that curled feather at the back end of a duck, that's the male. Females don't have that curl. Geese are a little trickier. Their external features aren't as obvious. So a little bit about geese. While geese are efficient at using pasture to produce meat and very large eggs, they're also large and strong and require skill in handling. They can be temperamental, the males, and they can inflict injury on a person, and it's especially of concern if there's children in the area. A recommended starter breed is the Pilgrim. I'll pass this around, and I have kept Pilgrim geese. They are on the priority list as threatened. They're a moderate-sized bird, 12 to 14 pounds. They're not particularly noisy. They do honk. The Chinese geese are very noisy birds. They're calm. They usually have a gentle temperament, but at nesting time, males of any species will let it be known that you're not welcome near the nest. They are the only species of goose that's sex-linked for color. The females are gray, the males are white, and even when they're goslings just out of the hatcher or out of the nest, the colors are different. The males are light gray, females are more olive-colored with a darker beak. If those geese, if they're crossed with something else, that sex-linked feature is lost. Geese, I'm just going to mention quickly that geese are generally not raised for egg production. There's a small market for eating eggs for geese. Many people do use them for the eggs, the shells for blown eggs to be decorated. Duck eggs can be used also, but the goose egg is considerably larger. Most breeds produce 20 to 45 eggs per year. The Chinese geese produce the most, 40 to maybe 100 eggs in 1 year. So I've only had time to touch on some of the highlights. 2 highly recommended books for details of all aspects of duck and goose care are Story's Guide to Raising Ducks and the Book of Geese. They're both written by Dave Holderreed, and he sells waterfowl on the West Coast. These are not library books, these are my books, but I have them up here, you can look at them. I also brought Standard of Perfection, which is American Poultry Association booklet. This is for exhibition birds, but it has pictures of some of the different breeds. So if you're considering poultry, I hope you will consider ducks and possibly geese, and especially that you will consider a heritage breed of any type of poultry. Thank you.
You want to take some questions now?
I can do questions now or
Take those down.
later. What do you want to do?
Is there a use for the males? Do you keep males around? Or say ducks?
Well, there are obvious uses for breeders, but generally they end up going for meat. I mean, people do keep ducks for pets also. But if you have more than one, they'll usually fight. And they're the same with chickens. The males want to rule the roost, whether they're a duck or a chicken or a goose. But so they,
And most want.
yeah, I mean, you might get lucky and get 2 that want to be buddies, but in a group, it doesn't work. They are beautiful, the males.
And is there I guess I'll rephrase that, what is the incidence, if any, of elderly duck eggs or goose eggs? And if there are any, are they breed specific?
I cannot answer that question at all. It's actually not something I've ever come across one way or the other. So I'd say it's probably pretty rare.
I understand that in raising ducks for meat, there's a certain age when they are processed very easily and other times not. And you want to speak on that?
Yeah, I would need to check the book, but yeah, there's a certain age at which it's in between the molt that if you miss that little window of opportunity, then you need to wait until they've grown a whole new set of feathers, because they can be very difficult to pluck. If you get it at the right time, it's not that much more difficult than plucking chickens. Bambi?
That brought up a thought to me of down, goose down. Is there a specific time that they butcher or so that they can get goose down, and which feathers are being used?
The down is there all the time. It's heavier in the coldest times because that's their insulation. And so the down the feathers that are used for stuffing pillows or jackets, it's going to be the finest stuff. And once you start getting any kind of the feather shaft, it's very likely to poke through your material. So you want the very softest, fluffiest feathers. And that's addressed in these books. I've never harvested for the down.
Do you have to kill them to get the down?
You don't need to, but you could only take quite a small amount if the bird is still alive. The females pluck their own down out of their breast to use that to line the nest, so they can stand to lose some amount of it. And in fact, eider ducks are wild sea ducks, and I don't know if it's still done or not, but people used to go collect, they would catch the ducks to get the down either off the duck or also out of the nest and use it for clothing and lining. I don't know if that's still done.
Among the various types of fowl, what is it that allows duck breast to be served rare? I mean, I've never been able to eat it because I think you wouldn't eat chicken rare, you wouldn't eat turkey, but you can eat duck breast rare. Do you know why that is?
You'd have to consult a chef, I don't know.
But I mean, there must be,
Is it,
because you have to cook chicken to a certain temperature for it to be safe.
well,
to eat,
so-
as far as I know.
it might have something to do with the source, industrial production versus small scale. So I don't know, I don't know the answer to that. Last question from Eric.
This is a sort of different subject, but some of the past sessions, we talked about pests in the garden. Would you convey your experience with chunks?
Does this have something to do with ducks?
No. This is chipmunks. How many can you catch?
Yeah, I have a great chipmunk trap I can recommend. Is that what you want to know?
So, a couple of years ago, you had an inordinate amount of chipmunks that
So when I think I know what he's talking about. When we had the ducks and the geese, they would have pans of food, free choice, when they weren't out on pasture. And I would notice chipmunks going this way and that way through the barn, and said, I think I'm losing some feed here. So I just used rat traps, and they work very effectively on chipmunks. And in the course of just a couple of days, I caught 13 chipmunks. I would set the trap, it wasn't even out of the barn, and I'd hear it snap. Got another one. And just, if Eric brings up an aside, I'll bring up another one. I know I'm running over my time. So it's often recommended to provide whole grains to ducks or geese. Oats, wheat, corn they can get too fat on. So I was providing the grain mix with the pellets, the oats. They really seemed to like those oats. So I kept putting the oats in the pan. One day my husband goes out and starts the tractor, lifts up the arms, quarts of oats come flowing out of the arms of the tractor. The mice really liked the oats, and that was their little silo. The ducks, the geese didn't care. So you do have to know where your food's going. All right, thank you very much. Next person. is being.
It's very interesting. I'd seen it before, and I knew I had gotten into raising some of the heritage breeds years ago for different reasons. And if you're thinking about getting, I really recommend picking one of the heritage breeds to grow. So anyways, I have a little bit different direction I want to take this. I think that chickens are a wonderful project for a family to do. And it's an incredible experience in teaching your children about responsibility, food production, where your food comes from, life, birth, death. And it's just a good way to show them how this all happens in a much more interesting way. It's incredible when you get chickens or ducks. I'm sure the ducks are the same way. The interactions of those animals with each other and how they interact with people and in their food is really fascinating. In fact, you'll turn the TV off and you'll watch the way they are outside. So that was what I had found. We had just gotten 5 Rhode Island Reds and started to raise them for egg production. I thought it would be really fun for my son and us to do that. I had had chickens years ago when I was a kid. In fact, I just, when you were talking about the geese, I remember we had a few geese too, and they actually defended the chicken coop from animals, other animals. But we had gotten those chickens, and when you get started with chickens, if you purchased a dog, you end up spending a lot of money. If the whole project, if you want to do something with your kids, is with chickens, each chicken costs anywhere from $5 to $10. I actually saw a chicken go for $1,000, but that was, you know, when you go into breeding and showing and things like that. But when you're talking, you get 6 chickens. If you were to purchase them locally, you're supposed to get 6 at a time. There's some rule in the state. They don't want them out there by themselves, I guess. They're a herd animal. So 6 is what you would get. There is some people that are doing a project where you actually get the chickens when they're half raised, so you're not dealing with all the temperature stuff. You get 3 chickens, you get a coop, you get the food, they deliver it to you for $500 and some, and then in the fall when you're done with them, you've had your fun, you don't have to deal with all the rest. They take it away for the winter if you want them to bring 3 more next summer. Apparently that's kind of a nice, easy project, because when you're talking about having these chicks, when you get them originally, you're going to need to have some different things to start. If you get them at a grain store, you get 6 of them, or you can have them shipped in, and that's quite an experience. But you're going to need to have something to put them in. And it's getting harder to get these types of bulbs, but they have the heat. So I'm really putting this on for them. This is just a plastic container, but you have to have it open so they can breathe and the air get in. And you put this on top of there so it doesn't burn through. And that is where you have them. You'd have to set this up before you get them, because you want to keep that 95 degree. I put newspapers down in the bottom, but if you just have them on newspapers, they'll tend to damage their legs sometimes. They'll get splay-legged, and because they're fragile and growing, they came out of that little egg in there, we just can't handle it. So I have devised a thing where you cut all those old t-shirts and you tuck that down over so you still get the moisture being absorbed by the newspapers, but you lay that down on top of it and tuck it under, and that gives them traction. If you were to put a towel in there, they tend to get their little nails caught in it, and that can cause trouble for them too. So this is just an easy way. You have a bunch of, and then you just roll it up and throw that part away and lay down a new set. Feeders, I'm gonna hand this around. They come in metal and plastic. I've gone to the plastic because
That's water.
that's for food. And then this goes on the same bottom, and that's for water. I like the plastic because if you notice, that metal one is rusty, and they don't take very long to get rusty. So the plastic, you can sterilize them, put away, and you have them for the next project. The other important thing, you need to have this, and you need to set it up ahead of time so that you can adjust to the right temperature. And you want that to be around 95 to start, and then each week you just drop the temperature by about 5, so you can change what bulbs you have in it, or you can raise it up higher so that they don't get as much heat. But you also, if you're looking at them and it's not sitting here, you can tell whether it's not hot enough or too hot. If they're sitting right underneath it, it's not hot enough. If they're all over in the other corner, you know it's too hot, so you just adjust it based on that. But it's best to set it up before they're arriving. So if you're gonna go to the feed store to pick them up there, you wanna have this set up the day before you go. The other way you can pick them up is you can talk to a breeder locally and get them. The advantage to doing that is most of them will say, you're getting chicks, and a lot of times you get a guarantee that they're hens. Well, that's a 90% guarantee. So you might end up with males. That might not be what you want. You may be living in a community that says you can have a certain amount of hens, but you can't have the cock-a-doodle-doo sound going. So what do you do with them? A lot of times the local breeders will take back. You need to make that arrangement with them beforehand. Say, you have a surprise, you have a male, you don't want the male, you can bring him back. If the project isn't working for you, you can bring him back. A lot of times that they'll allow for that, and that helps you to exit easily. The other way you can get them is to have eggs shipped in, or you buy eggs from a breeder. And this is a very simple brooder, which, not a brooder, hatcher, incubator. And you have to stabilize the temperature before you put the eggs in for that. You might want to read about it. A lot of times they do this in schools. It's a lot of fun. There's 2 sections. You have to keep moisture in there. You have to keep the temperature right. You need to turn them. I've brought along a turner because that got a lot easier because it automatically turned them several times a day for you, so you didn't have to turn them. But you also have to keep moisture in these. And with the ducks, you need to have more moisture than the chickens. And so you put the smaller row right here, you fill with water, and you just keep that. And that amount of moisture in the air in there allows them to grow. If you didn't have that, they won't survive. And if you put too much water in there, they tend to grow too big for their eggs, and then they can't turn and get themselves out. So then you'll lose them that way too. I used to raise silkies. And I don't know if you know what these are, but they look like chickens that have no regular feathers. They're just like puffballs. And they are the great for raising. They will sit on a rock and try and hatch it. They're really good hatchers. So one way I actually had that going into classrooms where the hen would get broody. We'd send into a classroom 10 eggs with a birdie hen. They kept the hen for the whole time, and when they hatched, they send back the hen with all the little chicks, which made a lot easier job for the teacher than having them put in this and having to turn them. So that project was kind of fun, but I really enjoyed the hens. They didn't lay much. They have dark skin. They have dark meat, so it's a totally different taste if with the chickens. That's the other thing. Are you raising them for eggs? Are you raising them for an experience for your children? Are you raising them for the meat? Some people choose not to raise meat. When I got into it, we were just going to eggs. When I was a kid, we never raised for meat. But the reality is you have chickens, they get older, they stop laying as much. Do you let them live out their old age and bury them when they die? You know, that's one possibility. Or do you butcher them and eat them? You know, so that's a decision you have to make for them. And they do have a life of, say, some don't live very long because of the way they've bred to be broilers, don't survive even a year a lot of times. They're designed to just grow fast, and their bodies can't handle that if they grow up to maturity. Or they can live to be 10 years old. So it's just, but they won't be producing the same amount of eggs at that point. So you have to decide what you want to raise them for. The other thing is do you raise them for, I have feathers that came from a bunch of different. So in a while back, people were doing a lot of things with feathers. So little hair pieces and stuff. But you have people that do fly fishing, so you can get very specific chickens because they have certain feathers. Or you're raising them to, you can do all sorts of things with the eggs afterwards. You can blow them out and have fun that way. I don't know, how many people have had chickens here? There's a lot of them. I'm sending around some different things. Layer crumble, which is mentioned earlier. You don't want to feed that to the chicks. The hair's scratched, so you can see the difference of what that is. The important thing with the chicks, and sometimes with real new chicks, I'll actually take the crumble and grind it up. You have to decide whether you're raising for, you're going to have organic or you're going to have medicated and you're going to go a different direction. That's your choice. That's purely. Here is something you need to also remember. This is called grit. It's actually little stones. They need that to grind up their food. If they don't have that, they won't be able to digest it properly. The other thing is you can get into, these are little leg bands, so you can mark them once you figure out the male, female. But the problem is you need to make sure that you know whether they're growing too big, because that will expand, and they're designed to expand some, but it can cause trouble with their feet too, so you would have to change them. Here's something mine, I use this. We have guineas right now. I'm trying to condition them to come back to where they sleep so they can be protected from predators. It's an important thing to condition them to that chick, 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 come home kind of message. And I always feed them in the pen where they're going to be so that they get conditioned to come back to that at night, because that is your responsibility for the predators, to keep them safe from predators. Predator is probably responsible to feed their young, and that's kind of how it's going to be the whole time. Dealing with predators is one of the most frustrating things at times, as far as them getting in and killing or stealing. And you just have to work on putting wire down, making sure your coop cannot be gotten into at night, because that's when they're usually out, but they can be out during the day too. So you just have to know what the predators are that are around and figure out from how you're going to defend them. So, but let's see how I'm doing on the choice of breeds. I think we talked about that based on what you want from them. That was spoke about earlier, but I did it for a lot of the different types of feathers. I also raised my chickens, picked chickens that had all different colored eggs. So Easter, you didn't even have to dye them. You have ones that are blue eggs, you have the dark chocolate colored eggs, you have little eggs, you have big eggs. It's just, I found it fascinating to have a whole spectrum of different kinds of eggs. And generally, the little tiny ones are, I found, were the cutest, and kids like them because you can get from like the silkies, their eggs were about half the size of a regular egg, so little, especially for the kids. Another fascinating thing is looking at eggs and knowing whether they're actually fertile. And that's another simple thing that you need is a flashlight, or you can buy a special thing for what they call handling eggs. And what you do is you hold it up to the side of the egg, and you'll see an air pocket there, and that will tell you how long that egg has been after it's been laid, and whether it's a fresh egg or not. You can also look at whether it's been fertilized, and also whether it's growing. So if you have it in the incubator, you don't have to wait the whole time to know whether you're going to have chicks in there. You can put it up and you can see the veins growing. Great experience. It's amazing. You can see the little chick inside moving around. And or you can see that something's going bad and there's no point in raising it, continuing through to the hatching. So that's worth it. Just a lot of fun to do that. The whole sexing thing, you can take classes to sex, and in fact the ratio of being successful at sexing different birds, some of the chickens have the color differential for them, but most of them don't. And you can see mannerisms in the chicks and say, okay, that's going to be a male or a female. I had a little silkie that was crowing 4 days. I knew what that one was. But you can also have silkies that they're still wondering until they actually lay an egg whether it's a male or a female. So it's difficult to sex a lot of the different chickens until they let you know what they are. The heat source for the brooder, the food, the newspapers, I wanted to make sure I hit all of that. We have guineas now, and I find them the noisiest birds I've ever had. I got them because I wanted them for ticks. I've had 5 attached ticks on me this year so far. I enjoy being outside, and they're supposed to be really good for eating ticks and other insects. Now I have bees as well, and they haven't gone after the bees, thank goodness, because that would be a problem. But they are a different kind of bird. I actually really enjoy eating guineas. So that's an added benefit, having guineas if you raise them. And their eggs are a really funny, odd-shaped little egg. And I would say, I keep saying it, that the guineas are the stupidest birds I've ever had. But they are very interesting in their own way. They yell very loud, they are good. They'll tell you if somebody's on your property or something is. But they also will all stand around a little grate and be screaming. I think that's how they get rid of predators, is screaming. And there's a chickmunk in the hole, and they're all talking about it. So, it doesn't necessarily mean it's something very bad. The other thing that's a benefit with the guineas is the fact that they don't go after your garden like chickens do. So if you have chickens, you need to protect your garden from your chickens, because those tomatoes look really good, those strawberries look really good to them, and they'll eat them. So although they're very good at turning your garden over in the fall for you, so just don't let them in during the rest of it. But the guineas have not gone into the garden. They're not really interested in tomatoes and strawberries and stuff. So that's a benefit of them, but we'll see. So I have a bunch of information to hand around here. These are books that are going to be in the library, so we can hand these out. There is a ton of different places you can have chickens and shipped in, or eggs shipped in, if that's what you want to do. Murray McMurray was the first place. that I got, Jenna Gunn and I ordered some in, and we had, we called them up because some of them weren't behaving very well, and then one day, they're put in a box and shipped to you. It's amazing. It's amazing they arrive alive ever, you know. You go down to the post office and pick them up early in the morning so they don't bounce around in the car. But we called them up and they said, oh, we're shipping you a whole nother box because they're not going to live. Some of them may look alive because they had a cold snap. And they said they're not dead yet, but they will die. So that's very disheartening if you have a box full. But that does happen sometimes, so that's one of the risks of doing that. But actually we succeeded in keeping most of them alive. So we had twice as many chicks as we had planned on. So that's one way. You can also have eggs shipped in. Now the problem with eggs shipped in, they need to move. If you're going to have eggs that sit and you're going to hatch them, they need to move around and move back and forth so they don't attach to the side of the box. So when you have them shipped in, the reality is the hatch rate is a lot lower because you just don't know. But if you get into showing them, the Murray McMurray chickens will not get you the ribbons. They'll get you, you know, you'll enjoy it, but they just aren't the quality of chicken if you get into the showing parts. So I had them shipped in from all over the United States, which was really interesting to see what I produced after that. So this is a magazine if you were getting into it. This magazine, I'm not sure if that other one I handed around, it is amazing that if you pick up a chick, you would never guess. And this one shows the chicks as well as the adults, what they look like, so it's kind of fun. So is there any questions?
Do you free range your birds during the day?
Yes.
Always, yeah.
I believe, well, I've chosen to go organic, and I also think that them eating all this stuff out there, and with the guineas, it makes sense.
Right.
If I don't let them out, they're not going to eat the chicks,
Right.
or the ticks.
Right.
So, yeah, I really believe in that, allowing them to be out and having that. And I've tried making some of those different things for moving around, you know, the chick, and that's a safer way to go as far as predators, where you move, and building your own chicken coops things is always a fun thing. I kind of made this rule for me when I was back then making stuff. I will buy the wire, but everything else has to be repurposed. So I was taking 2x4s and woods and old doors from cabinets to make the doors into the coops, but the wire I recognized I was going to have to buy that new. So that was a lot of fun trying to figure out how to do that. So projects. Chuck?
Yeah, I guess another concern, particularly is sustainability and whatnot, our kitchen waste and whatnot, and garbage, and we said that everything that doesn't go to the dog goes out with the chickens, and if
Right.
they don't eat it, it's in the compost. Is any other experiments?
Right. They really enjoy that. In fact, I have found that the favorite thing of the chickens is to eat old cucumbers. So ones that got too big in the garden, you slice them in half and throw them in there, or old pumpkins. They just love, you know, going after those. And if you give them something to do, they tend to not pick on each other. I'm not a big one at cutting meats and all that kind of thing. They keep this wrong to me, but different people do different things. I believe in giving them something to do with their time. And the scratch food is something that I use to also teach them to come back in, the chick, 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 you know, from very young. Really helps to get them conditioned to coming. The other thing that I found really fascinating is they will imprint with whatever group they're raised with. So if you have a mixed batch of chickens that you order in originally, then they're going to be accepting of all those different types of chickens. If you raise a bunch that are just one type and then try and mix in other ones, I found that it's a lot more difficult for them to accept the different ones. But if they were raised together, they do very well together. They just think that they're part. In fact, I put a Rhode Island red rooster under a friend's mallard duck. The eggs, I just put them in there, and she hatched them, and he was raised up to think he was a duck. And he would run along with the ducks. The other roosters would beat him up, but he thought that the ducks were his. So I thought that was fascinating too.
How do you know which chicken, if you have 6 Rhode Island Reds, how do you know which one laid which egg and which thing? Do they always lay in the same?
They tend to go to their own, but sometimes they go in, more than one will use the same nest. In fact, one will go in and kick out another one. You get to know which ones, they all looked alike at first, but with just that many, you got to know which was which. They were actually very different personalities, and one was the head honcho.
But when you go in the morning to collect the eggs, how do you know who laid that egg?
Don't know for sure.
So how do you know which chicken's not laying as much as she did before?
That is a problem. In fact, you also have problems with chickens will start breaking eggs. And that is a problem. And what you can get these marble eggs or hard eggs that you mix in the bunch so that they just stay there, and they'll hit on them and it won't break. And for some reason that kind of breaks them. But once you have a chicken that starts breaking eggs, they're not going to stop. They eat them. Then they've gotten into eating the eggs. So generally that one you're going to have to get rid of. If you're breeding chickens, you can't mix the breeds together because they will just breed with each other and then you have mixed chickens. If you're trying to show them, that doesn't work well. Some of the breeds, like on the list here, we raised, my son really wanted the phoenixes or the longtails, and I've noticed several of them on here are those. They are a family unit more than some of the others. Chickens like Rhode Island Reds have had a lot of the things bred out of them, the urge to sit, because they're not going to lay once they're ready to sit. They'll stop laying, and that if you're raising for production, that's not a good thing. And they're not real good at taking care of their young and things like that, but the silkies will be. Phoenixes are a family unit usually. We found the beautiful males will stick right with the hen and the chicks, and he actually almost takes care of them as well. It's fascinating that some of the breeds have real strong family unit kind of continuing with these heritage breeds. Any other questions?
Question is, what happened to that chicken when the ducks went to water?
He would run in, and then he'd stand there and go, this doesn't feel quite right. And then he would also scratch and go, what did I do? He was very confused. I called him Chuck, the duck that thought he was a chicken. So.
Can we find out about 4-H or poultry fancier association groups in this area?
There's not a strong 4-H group in the area. If you give me your an email or something, I'll send you an information that has phone numbers and contacts for a lot of the people in the Northeast that raise, and then they'll put you can get onto their list. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. Okay, so I figured that, well, first of all, I'm sure there are plenty of people who know a lot more about chickens than I do. You know, I've had them for, I think, maybe 8 years now. I started when I was running down the road, Birch Hill Road, and I ran by my neighbor Selby, and she said, hey, Ruth, do you want 4 chickens? And I said, sure. And then by the time I got to the end of Birch Hill Road, it had turned around. Maria Barth had heard that I was taking chickens. And so she said, do you want 4 more chickens? So I thought, well, I think I to end up with a lot more chickens. But, so that's how I got my first chickens. And, why not? That's a brooder. So it's like this, except it's a lot safer. You can adjust the height from super baby chick to tall pullet, and you can't catch them on fire. So I prefer it. It costs a little more than a heat lamp, but then you'll be popular with your chicken-loving friends, because whenever they have to brood some chicks, they can borrow your brooder. I think it costs about $75. So instead of talking about how to raise chickens and all of the details, which I think we just got a nice overview from Bambi on, I'll talk about why you should get chickens if you don't already have them. How many people here already have chickens? Okay, so I only have to convert half of you. So there are so many reasons to have chickens. I thought they would be a fair amount of work, but I was prepared to do it just because I thought they're so enchanting. They're like little robots in down coats. And they're less work than a dog. And I only have one dog, but that's because I'm fussy about how I train her and everything. If I had 2 dogs, I think I'd have a lot more chaos. But you can have a lot of chickens without that much work. You just need to make a place for them. So a lot less work than I thought. They're fun pets. There's a picture of my son watching cartoons with the chickens, his chicks in a box there. He's drinking milkshakes. He gained weight, which at work, he's almost 100 pounds now. Chickens like to snuggle. There's my daughter snuggling the Australorps. I think that's Tiffany and Cluckapus. Tiffany is still around. She's 7 years old now. And she hasn't laid eggs in a long time, but she is the sweetest, prettiest hen. And I don't know how she's evaded all the predators, but she has. Another reason to have chickens is that it's a good science project for your kids. This is Maria's incubator, and when her barn burned down, the only rooster that made it out was son of Macho Man, because the other roosters were not nice to him and they made him sleep outside the barn. And so when the barn caught fire, he was the only chicken that survived, even though he was badly burned. And so she said, well, why don't you take son of Macho Man in your barn, and then you can have fertilized eggs and then incubate them, and then you can give me some chickens back. So that's what we did. And this is that project, which we had a lot of fun with. We learned how to candle eggs. We learned how to check them to make sure they're still good and to see how far along they are. And then we hatched them, and that's how we got that chick that you saw before. That's Sammy under a peach tree with, I think that's either rabies or bullet. Anyway, every chicken has 2 names in our house. My daughter names one, gives them one name, my son gives them another name. And they both know a lot about how to care for chickens, much more so than dogs. I don't know why. They're not that interested in feeding and training the dog, but my son has read many books about different chicken breeds, how to raise them, how to take care of them. I have lots of pictures of him reading books about teaching chickens manners and things like that. He's read the story Chicken book many times. They are super cute. There's one that hatched. I think that might have been Chip. There was a little chip of egg stuck on him. Yeah, it was Chip. Chicks make your kids cuter. So if you're taking pictures of your children and you give them a chicken, all of a sudden your kid becomes at least 10, maybe 100 times cuter than they were before. And so, for example, that's one of Maria's hens. That's a buffalo cream hen at Maria's house. That's not even a baby chick. That's a big full-size hen, and he's still much cuter with the hen than without. So you get that going for you. You'll learn a lot about chicken behavior, things that you just, I don't know, why would you know these things if you don't have chickens? But this chicken really liked to hide eggs, and I didn't realize that, because I gave her the run of the barn in the winter, and she went into the back of the barn and found one of those LL Bean, snow tubes that you slide down a hill in, and she laid the eggs there secretly, and then I found her sitting on them. She was hiding them from me. So that was sad. I had to take her off that nest. But you learn weird things like they hide eggs. They do sometimes eat their own eggs, and then you'll go on the internet and you'll learn how to defeat the egg eater. I put my last egg eater in a dog kennel on one of those kids' pull carts that I got from the dump, and then I put a 2x4 under it to lift the end up so that when she laid the egg, it would roll to one end of the dog crate, and then I put wood over the slats so that the egg would roll under the slats so she couldn't get at it, and it worked like a charm. But then a fox got her. But you know what? Foxes have to eat too. So another thing that chickens will do for you is they will turn over your compost. And so I grow things in raised beds, and I put my compost bins right on top of the raised beds. So out of, I think I have, do I have 12 now? Is that true? Well, anyway, I always set aside one raised bed just for composting. And then when the compost bins get full, I just lift up the composter and move them to the next bed, so that each raised bed keeps getting a constant supply of compost. And that's what that looked like about a month ago. With that's like a whole orange, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. But now it's almost finished compost, because they would go in there, they'd find the worms, they'd turn it over every day, they'd aerate it, and now that compost, it's like black gold. It's really, really great stuff. So they're happy to help you with that. They help you with your landscaping. So if you have little chickweed or things that you want taken, we have a little sort of stone henge, a little hen henge in the front of our house, and then chickens used to come up and visit. They're locked away now because of the fox, but I'll get to that in a minute. But that helps with your landscaping. So they're very entertaining. 2 summers ago, my son filmed his own reality show called Living Like Chickens, where every chicken had their own storyboard, they had a character, and he lost the camera in the orchard somewhere. It was one of these point and shoots. But this was episode 1, Tiffany. She is a very entertaining chicken. He also keeps elaborate charts of all the chickens, and he ranks them on their various features: egg laying, speed, agility, broodiness, sense of humor, and friendliness. So each one gets a score, and then he changes the score over time. So you can make your own reality show. That really did keep him busy for a whole summer. Then you could write a biography of each hen. This is the 4th biography with black and white photography. And this is the page about Death Week, which was, I think Deathbeak's other name was Fluffy. So obviously Hannah and Sam have different ideas of how you should name a chicken. She liked Fluffy, he liked Deathbeak. I think he thinks that all the chickens are really kind of video game characters in his own head. So that kept him very busy. You will learn new vocabulary words like broody. This is the nesting box that my son has written in chalk. Very broody. And you'll learn that your hen sometimes gets very hot underneath. Hormones kick in, and then she doesn't want to get off the nest and doesn't want to eat. And then she has to go in the broody breaker, which is just a dog kennel with no place to lie down to get hot. And sometimes you put a fan under there, and that is Fluffy. She was a very broody girl, and you know what? She actually died of anorexia. She would go in the nesting box and not eat. That's one thing that broody hens do. They stop eating because they just want to sit on that nest. And she just got very, very thin and then died. And I don't know how to treat chicken anorexia. I think human anorexia is hard to treat. I have no idea how you do it with chickens. So, rest in peace, Fluffy. You can give eggs to people as gifts. So, in 8th grade, Hannah did a project called the Random Eggs of Kindness, where we would just donate a dozen eggs to whoever, whenever we had an extra dozen. And then that's her artwork. That's her with Tiffany on her head. And then my garden's in the back. You can see my wall of water for my tomatoes. And that's a fun thing to do. A lot of people appreciate eggs, and food banks will take them. Now, for some reason, N68 Hours of Hunger isn't taking them right now, but in the past, there were some families that really needed some extra food, and I checked with the school nurse and said, ask if somebody wants eggs, and she said, yeah, they actually would really like eggs. So, and I think you can get away with that. You can also sell them from the end of your driveway if you want to, and you don't have to have them graded or anything like that. But if you try to sell them at a farmer's market, I don't know what would happen. I know that in some states, once you bring them to a farmer's market, then they try to regulate you. I'd be surprised if they do that in New Hampshire, but anyway, you can give them, I have a neighbor who always wants them, and I put the eggs in her mailbox and then send her a text, you have eggs, and then she puts it back with some money in my mailbox, and I'm like her drug dealer except for eggs. So I never have a hard time getting rid of eggs, because there's so many people who just want fresh, free-range eggs. And then also food banks will take them if you call and tell them what you have. Sometimes they don't even know what people want, so they think that people won't take them, but they want them. You're also going to build stuff or buy it on Amazon. That's actually a little cedar coop that you can pick up and move around. And what's nice is, obviously, this was when I thought, oh, all our chickens will fit right in here, which is not true. Now they take up a third of the barn. They used to have the whole barn, but now it's a third. And the nice thing about that is you can raise little pullets in it. So once they're too big for the bathtub, you can move them into the garage and put your brooder in there and then transition them into the regular coop. So it's a great way to contain, you could contain a nuisance hen that's picking on other hens, or baby hens, or baby pullets, which is just an immature hen. So you're going to do that, and the coop will look a lot messier than that after 8 years, but it was really beautiful when I first had it. I love the design on that, but it was a little pricey. And oh, you're also going to start collecting chicken-themed objects. I have a lot of rooster and chicken paraphernalia. I don't know where I got the sign. I still haven't figured out where to hang it because you need to. It's supposed to go over a door, so it's in the pantry right now. You will love your birds. That was son of Macho Man, who really started it all for us because when Maria lent them to us, he fertilized those eggs, and we got our first batch of home-raised chickens. Before that, we just got them from running down the road. But anyway, so I think it's very, there are a lot of things, I mean, one thing leads to another. It's true that, so you'll learn all this stuff, and you'll make all these friends on the internet. All you have to do is join like the New Hampshire and Vermont poultry enthusiasts, and if you say, my chicken's doing this, I don't know what to do, there are 5 people who will say, I know how to handle this. Use the ceramic eggs. Here's a roll-away nesting box so the chicken can't eat eggs anymore. I mean, everybody likes to, tell you what they know about their chickens. So it's kind of like anything else, like with orchardry. Once I joined a few news groups about orchardry, boy, I mean, you don't have to say much and people will just run in to help you. It's kind of amazing. I'd say, well, I don't really like the fruit off of this tree. I think I'm going to rip it out. And 10 people piped up, don't rip it out. You can top work it. We're going to tell you how to do it and walk you through it. And here's how to get your scion wood. And here's how to do the grafting. And I said, I don't know anything about grafting. And they're like, oh, it's not a problem. You can handle this. So, and the same thing is true for chickens. There's so many great resources on the internet. There are a couple of great books like The Stories Guide to Raising Chickens and Backyard Chickens, but I think just the internet alone will answer pretty much most of your questions. There's always a whole bunch of people out there who love to, if you're enthusiastic about something like chickens or apple trees, you're, opposite numbers out there on the internet, saying, I love that apple too, or I hate that apple too, or I know how to fix this. So there's a whole bunch of information out there. So I think the information right now is, that's the easiest thing about it because there's so much out there people are willing to share. So anything, if you have to troubleshoot predators, people will tell you how to catch predators. I have a trap out now. I have a call into a trapper. I have electric poultry netting on the way because of this nuisance fox that got some of my hens and 2 of my roosters who really went down fighting because Dean got it all on the security cam. Overall, we haven't had that much of a predator problem. We've lost 1 or 2 a year to hawks, which is sort of the price of doing business if you're going to free range. But we haven't had any nighttime predators because they're in a very nice, secure barn. And we haven't had any foxes or weasels during the day. And this is the first year where we had a fox, and we didn't see it in person. It always was caught on camera because that thing was it was stalking the area, making sure it knew when I left every day. So it was really casing the joint. And don't worry, I'm going to get even with that fox. He will be gone, but he will come back and eat every single bird if you don't start giving. Once a fox knows you have chickens, it's coming back for the rest of them, just one at a time. You've got a buffet, he's got the time, he's gonna be there. So now we have to contend with that. But overall, if you can rig it so that you don't have too many losses and you can do free ranging, but you will have some. I just think unless you coop them up all the time, you're gonna lose a few birds. And it's sad, but the hawks have to eat too. Everybody's got to eat. I just tell the hawks you have other food choices. What about all those squirrels? But I recommend it. And I would say I wouldn't have any fewer than 3 chickens because they really do like company. They feel more secure. And my girls always loved having a rooster, and we think we might have a rooster in this latest batch of chicks. So even though it's supposed to be, they're Maori chickens, they're supposed to be sexed, this is a pullet with very big feet and it's jumping around a lot. I think it's a roo. But anyway, they loved having Son of Macho Man. Once he came in that coop, they were all so calm and happy. And I think that they're a little traumatized now because they lost their roos and a couple of hens, but so they do actually like having a rooster. And these 2 roosters actually got along. I have had roosters that did not get along in the past. They can fight with each other to some extent, I don't care, but once they come after me, then I have gone as far as I can in the poultry criminal justice system with them, and they have to go to Jeremiah's for rehabilitation. But I like having roosters around. I think they're just gorgeous to look at, and I can tell you that these 2 birds, they gave as good as they got from this fox. I mean, they had spurs, they used them, it was a big fight. It didn't stop the fox from taking hens, but, and also I have to say, they loved to protect. Especially the last one, the one that you saw turning over the garden. That was GB1, grandbaby 1 of Macho Man, Son of Macho Man, and he was the chief of Homeland Security. He loved his job. He would get out there and, get his hat and feathers up and flap his wings, and he would just look huge. He would look like a golden retriever. But this fox was hungry, and so it decided to go in and fight, and he went down fighting. But, and I did save some of his tail feathers, but it's weird though, you get kind of used to it. Like the last rooster that it got, I was sad, but I immediately cut off the leg because I was going to use it as bait to catch the fox. And it just, I don't know. I cut plenty of chickens though from the store, so it just doesn't bother me. But I don't like to lose, and I don't want to lose any more hens. So I've got another trap coming and a trapper and my electric fence. So I've got a layered approach to security now. But I think my hens would be happier with a rooster. I mean, so we'll have one way or the other. If this little chick is not a roo, we're going to get a rooster from somebody else. And there's always somebody who has a rooster to get rid of in New Hampshire and Vermont and Massachusetts. So it's not hard to come by roosters if you need one. So I just think they're gorgeous too. But they're not good eating. You can talk to Maria about Son of Macho Man, because she finally did put him down when he was attacking her, because she was wearing a red fleece, and that set him off, and then he never stopped. But she put him in the stew pot, and she said, I cooked him 18 hours, and he was inedible. So I wouldn't recommend eating roosters. Well, I mean, what's the point? So, but anyway, any questions about why you should get chickens? It's hard to think of any reasons not to. You do have to cover your garden. What?
What are you doing as a trail?
I have my assistants to help me. Dean and the kids watch the chickens. It really just up until the fox came, it was just a matter of letting them, and that was like 7 years. So for 7 years, we would just let them out in the morning, and then they would coop themselves at night, and we didn't, other than a deer fence around the orchard, they didn't have any defense against predators. So it was mostly hawks that we had to worry about. And so they're pretty low maintenance. Now that we're going to try the electric poultry netting, it might be a little different. It is true that they do eat your garden if you're not careful, especially kale. They can't get enough kale. But what I do is I use those 6-foot aluminum wires that I put on the inside of my raised beds and then cover it with a net, and they can't get in there, so that's perfectly fine. They like being in the orchard, it gives them lots of protections. I mean, chickens really are forest animals. They don't like open pasture. You see them all the time in pictures in open pasture. They really hate that. They'd much rather be foraging in the woods, in an orchard, where they're protected from predators. But anyway, this is an example of the raised bed. That's covered with some remag, which is like a garden cloth that makes it a little warmer. So that bed isn't being currently composted. That's the compost bed. But the little wires give it you enough support for the netting, and it also protects from bugs and things like that, and adds a little heat if you want that. So it's pretty easy to, if you plant in rectangular plots, it's pretty easy to protect from chickens if you free range. And of course, if you contain them in something like electric netting, where it's like usually 150 to 200 feet of fencing, so that's solar powered, and the chickens learn to not touch it. And you have to train predators to not touch it. You have to put some tin foil with peanut butter in it on the edge, so the fox or some bacon, and so the fox tries to get that fence. And once it touches it, it learns it's not a nice experience, and they learn. So that's another way you could protect your garden. But I like them in the garden because with the system I have now, they're mostly just, they're tillers. And they eat a lot of worms, and they poop in my garden and make fertilizer. So I think it's doable if you have a little plan. But if you put everything out there and don't cover it, and then you let your chickens in, all your beets are going to be gone, your spinach, your kale. And sometimes they'll peck at tomatoes a little bit just because they're curious. They don't really like to eat it, but other than that, I like what they do in the garden, and they keep me company. They add like a kind of life to the place that doesn't, I mean, the dog is not outside with me a lot, but when the chickens are there, first of all, when I come home, they run at me like I'm a rock star. They'll come running at me like, oh my God, she's home, I can't believe it, it's so exciting. So that's kind of fun. That's probably the only members of the household that'll do that. They just kind of add an energy that you otherwise might not have. I haven't seen that with geese and ducks. And guinea fowl, those things are really noisy. Marie has hers cooped in the shed now, and she used to let them roost in the tree, but they all got eaten by foxes, so she trained them to stay in the coop at night. But when you go in the coop, when she's out of town, I'll go in and
Where are your mouse?
Oh my God, those things would scare anybody away. They were really intent on driving me out. And I think it would be alarming to almost any animal to have a whole bunch of these very noisy birds chase you. So, and they do eat ticks. I think they both eat ticks. But I wouldn't count on that for tick protection. I would put DEET on and treat all your clothes with permethrin. I wouldn't rely only on guinea fowl and chickens because, I don't know, too many of my neighbors have got Lyme disease now. Anyway, it's fun. Does anybody have any other questions?
I was gonna ask what your chicken's favorite food is.
They like watermelon. I thought I had a slide in here of watermelon. Watermelon and spaghetti is their favorite snack. But they do process all of our rice and pasta and everything that we don't eat for one thing, it keeps, so we haven't had a raccoon problem since we processed the food through the chickens first. The compost really just has chicken poop, coffee grounds, eggshells, things that I don't feed to the chickens in it. So, and oranges, they don't eat oranges that much.
Yeah.
They'll eat chicken.
Yeah.
And they will eat, one time I did a pork roast and there was a lot of fat, and I thought, I wonder what would happen if I put this in a blender and fed it to the chickens. And guess what? They really liked it. So they'll eat pure pork fat. It's probably not good to give them that very often. I should say that my chickens, I did have some fatalities because of, they ate some organic food that they really liked, and I think it was too rich. So I had 2 chickens that died on the same day, different breeds, different ages, And so I did a necropsy. Oh, that's another thing you're gonna learn, is how to do a necropsy on a chicken, because one thing leads to another. So there are YouTube videos of how to do this, just how to cut open a chicken and identify the parts and weigh the liver, and, and do your own necropsy. These chickens had basically gorged themselves on this organic food that was too fatty while I was in Japan, and I called the manufacturers to tell them this, and I said, and she said, well, you probably were just overfeeding them all along. And I said, well, what's the probability that 2 chickens of different breeds and ages die within 24 hours, just a week or so after we switched to your food? And she said, well, it's always sad when we lose a friend. And I just said, you're not getting the message, are you? I said, I'm not trying to sue you or anything like that. I'm just trying to explain to you that there might be something wrong with your feed. But she didn't really want to hear it, so I just dropped it at that point. But I would not, I'd be careful about changing your chicken's food very quickly, giving them too rich a diet. Just because it's organic does not mean that it's the best food for them. You have to have the right nutritional balance. So you don't want to give them too many table scraps, so they look at like fatty liver disease, which, chickens shouldn't have fatty liver disease. It's bad enough that we have it. But yeah, so you'll get to do a necropsy, and your kids can either do it or not do it, depending on how squeamish they are. I thought they'd be squeamish, but then my daughter said, I can't believe you did a necropsy without me. And I'm like, okay, well, next time you're in. So, and you can do it very easily with chicken shears and just a very large baking sheet. You're going to want a baking sheet because there's a lot of fluid in that animal. And then you're going to want to look at all the organs and see how healthy they are. And I do that if they just die spontaneously. If they're eaten by a predator, I know why they died. So I don't really need to do that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.